The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Canon City, Colorado, as Abigail Bennett demonstrated the proper stance for firing a pistol to the semicircle of nervous women gathered behind her father's mercantile. The year was 1882, and while most of Canon City's female residents concerned themselves with proper homemaking and social etiquette, 23-year-old Abigail had other priorities, namely, ensuring that no woman in her town would ever again suffer what her mother had. "Remember, ladies," Abigail called out over the fading echo, her voice clear and unwavering as she lowered her Colt revolver. "A steady hand means a steady shot, and a steady shot might save your life someday." Mrs. Peterson, the banker's wife, nervously adjusted her bonnet. "My husband says it's unladylike to handle firearms, Miss Bennett." "And what does Mr. Peterson say about being defenseless when he's away on business?" Abigail countered, tucking a wayward strand of auburn hair behind her ear. Her green eyes flashed with the determination that had become her signature trait in Canon City. "I suspect he says nothing at all on the matter," came a new voice from the entrance to the alley. Sheriff Thomas Miller stood with his thumbs hooked in his belt, disapproval etched into the deep lines of his weathered face. The women immediately scattered, murmuring hasty goodbyes and avoiding the lawman's gaze as they hurried away. "Sheriff," Abigail acknowledged, calmly holstering her weapon beneath her skirt. "What brings you to my little gathering? Complaints, Miss Bennett." "Again." Sheriff Miller sighed heavily. "Mayor Davis himself this time. Says you're stirring up trouble, putting dangerous ideas in the heads of proper ladies." Abigail smiled tightly. "Teaching women to protect themselves is hardly dangerous, Sheriff. Not teaching them now, that's the real danger. This town has laws, Miss Bennett. I uphold them." "And I'm not breaking any by teaching self-defense," she replied coolly. "Unless there's a new ordinance against women learning to survive." Sheriff Miller removed his hat and ran a hand through his graying hair. "Your father was my friend, Abigail. I promised him I'd look out for you after he passed. But I can't keep turning a blind eye to these sessions of yours, not with the town council breathing down my neck." Abigail's jaw tightened at the mention of her father. Jonathan Bennett had been Canon City's most respected merchant until consumption took him 3 years earlier, leaving his daughter to run the mercantile alone. "My father taught me to stand up for what's right. That's all I'm doing." "The council's threatening to revoke your business license," the sheriff said quietly. The color drained from Abigail's face. The mercantile was all she had left. "They can't do that. There's no legitimate reason they'll find one." Sheriff Miller settled his hat back on his head. "Just consider toning it down, will you? For your own sake." As the sheriff walked away, Abigail's hands balled into fists at her sides. She would not stop, not when she remembered her mother's bruised face, her broken spirit. Not when she knew that behind the lace curtains of Canon City's respectable homes, too many women lived in fear. She gathered her training materials and headed back to the mercantile, her mind racing with plans for the next lesson. The afternoon sun beat down on Canon City's Main Street as she approached her store. The hand-painted sign reading Bennett's Mercantile swung gently in the breeze, the gold lettering catching the sunlight. Inside, the familiar scent of leather, coffee, and dried goods greeted her. Abigail moved through the aisles, straightening inventory and checking stock, the routine motions doing little to calm her agitation. The bell above the door jingled, and she looked up to see a stranger enter. He was taller than most men in Canon City, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build evident even beneath his trail-worn duster. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, and piercing blue eyes set in a face tanned by long days under the sun. "Afternoon," he greeted, his voice deep with a hint of a southern drawl. "Isaac Newcomb. Just rode in from Wyoming territory." Abigail straightened, automatically assessing him as she did with everyone who entered her store. His stance suggested confidence without arrogance. The revolver at his hip was well maintained but showed signs of use. His clothes were dusty from the trail but of good quality. "Welcome to Canon City, Mr. Newcomb. I'm Abigail Bennett. What can I help you with today?" "Provisions, mainly," he replied, glancing around the well-stocked store. "Planning to stay a while? Business or pleasure?" Abigail asked, moving behind the counter. A slight smile curved his lips. "A bit of both, I suppose. I've purchased the Holloway Ranch outside town." Abigail raised her eyebrows. The Holloway place had been empty for nearly a year since Old Man Holloway passed. It was good grazing land with access to water, but the ranch house had fallen into disrepair. "That's quite an undertaking," she remarked. "The house needs considerable work." "I noticed." His smile widened, revealing a flash of white teeth. "I'm handy with tools." "Then you'll need nails, lumber, and probably some new window glass," Abigail said, all business despite the unexpected flutter in her stomach. "As well as the usual supplies, I imagine." "Yes, madam." He approached the counter, setting his hat down. "Though I heard something interesting as I was stabling my horse at the livery. Seems there's a woman in town teaching other ladies how to shoot and defend themselves." Abigail tensed. "Is that so?" Isaac nodded. The livery man seemed quite worked up about it, called her a troublemaker. His eyes held hers. "Wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you, Miss Bennett?" "I might," she replied cautiously. "Good." He leaned forward slightly. "Because I'd like to arrange for lessons." Abigail blinked in surprise. "You want lessons?" "In self-defense," Isaac chuckled, a warm sound that seemed to fill the space between them. "Not for myself, though I could probably learn a thing or two. For my sister, Eliza. She's arriving on Friday's stage. She's 19 and has lived a sheltered life back east with our aunt. I'd feel better knowing she could handle herself, especially while I'm working the ranch." "I see." Abigail studied him carefully. Was this some sort of trick? A way for the town council to catch her in the act? But there was something open and genuine in Isaac Newcomb's expression that made her want to trust him. "Most men in these parts," she said slowly, "don't approve of women learning such skills." "I'm not most men," he replied simply. "My mother was from the Cherokee Nation. She taught me that strength isn't just in a man's fists, but in a woman's spirit too. Eliza has the spirit. She just needs the skills." Something in Abigail softened at his words. "Your sister is welcome to join our group, Mr. Newcomb. We meet behind the mercantile on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons." "Much obliged." He straightened up. "Now about those supplies." As Abigail filled his order, she found herself stealing glances at the tall cowboy. There was something different about him, a quiet confidence, an absence of the condescension she'd grown accustomed to from men in Canon City. When he left, arms laden with packages, he paused at the door. "Miss Bennett, for what it's worth, I don't think you're a troublemaker. I think you're doing something important." The bell jingled as he departed, leaving Abigail standing behind the counter with an unfamiliar warmth spreading through her chest. The following day brought a confrontation Abigail had been dreading. Mayor Davis himself strode into the mercantile, his rotund figure clothed in an expensive suit that strained at the buttons. "Miss Bennett," he boomed, "we need to discuss these activities of yours." Abigail straightened her spine. "I'm running a business, Mayor Davis. Unless you're here to make a purchase, I'm afraid I don't have time for a social call." Mayor Davis's face reddened. "This is not a social call. This is official town business. Your so-called self-defense lessons are causing a disturbance in our community. Teaching women to protect themselves is a disturbance, Abigail asked, her tone deceptively mild. It's unnatural, the mayor replied, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. Women have no business handling firearms or engaging in physical altercations. That's what husbands and fathers are for. And when husbands and fathers are the ones they need protection from, Abigail challenged, unable to keep the edge from her voice, Mayor Davis spluttered. That's an outrageous suggestion. The good men of Canon City are not all good men, Abigail interrupted. You know it as well as I do, Mayor. How many times did my mother appear in public with bruises she claimed came from falling? How many other women in this town do the same? Your father was a troubled man, Miss Bennett, the mayor said stiffly. But that is hardly representative. My father was a drunk who beat my mother for 15 years, Abigail said coldly. And everyone in this town knew it and did nothing, including you, Mayor. A heavy silence fell between them. The town council will be voting next week on a new ordinance, Mayor Davis finally said. It would prohibit the discharge of firearms within town limits, except by law enforcement officers. It would also forbid the gathering of more than 3 women for any purpose without a male relative present. Abigail's heart pounded in her ears. That's absurd. You can't possibly. We can and we will, the mayor cut in. Unless, of course, you voluntarily cease these disruptive activities. You're asking me to choose between my business and helping women protect themselves, Abigail said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm asking you to be reasonable, Miss Bennett. The mayor turned to leave. You have until the council meeting next Thursday to decide. Good day. After he left, Abigail sank onto a stool behind the counter, her hands trembling. The mercantile was her livelihood, her independence. Without it, she would have nothing. But how could she abandon the women who relied on her, who were finally learning to stand up for themselves? The bell above the door jangled again, and Abigail hastily wiped her eyes. Miss Bennett. Isaac Newcomb stood in the doorway, concern evident on his face. Are you all right? Abigail straightened, embarrassed to be caught in a moment of weakness. Mr. Newcomb, I'm fine, thank you. He didn't look convinced. I saw the mayor leaving. He seemed agitated. Mayor Davis is often agitated, Abigail replied with forced lightness, particularly when it comes to me. Isaac closed the door behind him and approached the counter. Is this about the lessons? Abigail hesitated, then nodded. The town council is proposing an ordinance that would effectively make my classes illegal. They're also threatening my business license. Isaac's jaw tightened. That's not right. It's how things work in Canon City, Abigail said with a bitter smile. Men make the rules, women abide by them. Not all men agree with those rules, Isaac said quietly. What will you do? Abigail shook her head. I don't know. The mercantile is all I have, but these women. She trailed off, unable to articulate the responsibility she felt toward them. Maybe there's another way, Isaac suggested. A compromise. What kind of compromise could possibly satisfy both sides? Abigail asked skeptically. Isaac considered for a moment. What if the lessons were held outside town limits, on private property? Like where? Like my ranch, he offered. It's only 3 miles from town. The women could ride out twice a week. We have a barn that could be used in bad weather and plenty of open space for practice. Abigail stared at him in surprise. You do that? For women you don't even know? For my sister, he said. For you? Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. And because it's the right thing to do. Why do you care so much? Abigail asked, genuinely curious. Most men who come through that door either ignore what I'm doing or actively oppose it. Isaac leaned against the counter. My mother was married to a white man before she met my father. He beat her so badly she lost a child. When she finally escaped, she had nowhere to go, no one to help her. My father found her half dead on the trail to his ranch. His blue eyes darkened with the memory. No woman should ever be that helpless. Abigail felt a connection to this man that transcended their brief acquaintance, a shared understanding born of witnessing the same injustices. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll consider your offer. But I should warn you, associating with me could make things difficult for you in town." Isaac smiled, a slow, warm smile that reached his eyes. "Miss Bennett, I've never much cared what other people think of me, and something tells me you haven't either." For the first time that day, Abigail felt the weight on her shoulders lighten. "Now," Isaac said, "I actually came in to ask if you carry seed potatoes. I'd like to start a kitchen garden at the ranch before Eliza arrives." Abigail welcomed the return to business. "Yes, I have some in the storeroom. Let me get them for you." As she moved through the store, she found herself pondering Isaac Newcomb's offer and the man himself. There was something refreshingly straightforward about him, a quality rare in a town built on appearances and unspoken rules. Perhaps his arrival in Canon City was exactly what she needed, what they all needed. Friday came, and Abigail watched from the mercantile window as the afternoon stage rolled into town. She had spent the past 2 days informing her students about the potential change in location for their lessons. Most had responded with relief that the classes would continue, though some expressed concern about traveling to the Newcomb Ranch. Curiosity about Isaac's sister had brought Abigail to the window at the stage's scheduled arrival time. She observed as Isaac helped a slender young woman descend from the coach. Even from a distance, the family resemblance was evident, the same dark hair, though Eliza's fell in long waves down her back, and the same confident posture. Isaac pointed toward the mercantile, and Abigail hastily stepped back from the window, not wanting to be caught watching. She busied herself with arranging a display of canned goods as the bell announced their entrance. "Miss Bennett," Isaac greeted, removing his hat. "I'd like you to meet my sister, Eliza Newcomb." Eliza stepped forward, extending her hand. She was pretty, with her brother's blue eyes set in a heart-shaped face. Her traveling dress was simple but well-made, speaking of modest but comfortable means. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Bennett," Eliza said, her voice carrying the same hint of a Southern accent as her brother's. "Isaac has told me about your self-defense classes. I'm very eager to participate." Abigail shook the offered hand, noting the firm grip. "The pleasure is mine, Miss Newcomb, and please call me Abigail." "Then you must call me Eliza," the younger woman replied with a warm smile. "Eliza needs some essentials," Isaac explained. "The ranch house is, well, it's seen better days." "It's a disaster," Eliza clarified with a laugh. "But Isaac assures me it has potential." "It does," Isaac insisted. "Just needs a woman's touch. And a new roof, new floors and windows that actually keep out the wind," Eliza added dryly. Abigail found herself smiling at their banter. "I can certainly help with household supplies." "And perhaps some fabric for curtains and linens." Eliza's eyes lit up. "Oh yes, that would be wonderful." As Abigail showed Eliza around the store, the two women fell into easy conversation. Eliza explained that she had lived with their aunt in Virginia since their parents' deaths 10 years earlier. Isaac worked cattle drives for years, saving every penny to buy his own place, she said proudly. "When he wrote that he'd finally found the right ranch, I couldn't wait to join him." Aunt Harriet was horrified, of course. She thinks the West is nothing but savages and outlaws. "We do have our share of both," Abigail admitted, "but there's a freedom here you won't find back east." "That's exactly what I told Aunt Harriet," Eliza exclaimed. I want to live by my own rules, not society's expectations. Abigail glanced at Isaac, who was examining a display of tools nearby. Your brother mentioned you might be interested in my self-defense classes. Eliza nodded eagerly. More than interested. I've read about women in the West who can ride and shoot as well as any man. I want to be capable like that. The classes may be moving to your ranch, Abigail explained in a lowered voice. The town council isn't particularly supportive of my endeavors. Isaac told me. It's ridiculous, Eliza declared, as if knowing how to protect oneself somehow makes a woman less feminine. Many men find capable women threatening, Abigail said with a wry smile. Then they're not the kind of men worth knowing, Eliza replied decisively. From across the store, Isaac called, Eliza, come see these lamps. They'd be perfect for the parlor. As Eliza moved to join her brother, Abigail found herself studying the siblings with growing admiration. They seemed to share not only physical traits, but also values that aligned with her own rarity in Canon City. When they had completed their purchases, an impressive array that would require delivery by wagon, Isaac approached the counter while Eliza examined fabric one last time. I've been thinking about our discussion, Abigail said quietly. I believe I will accept your offer to hold the classes at your ranch. Relief washed over Isaac's face. I'm glad to hear it. When would you like to start? Next Tuesday, if that suits you. It would give me time to inform everyone and arrange transportation for those who need it. Tuesday is perfect, Isaac agreed. I can come into town with the wagon to transport anyone who doesn't have their own means. Their conversation was interrupted by the bell above the door. Sheriff Miller entered, his expression hardening when he saw Isaac and Abigail in close conversation. Mr. Newcomb, the sheriff acknowledged with a nod. I see you've met our local entrepreneur, Sheriff, Isaac replied evenly. Miss Bennett has been most helpful in outfitting our ranch. Sheriff Miller's gaze shifted to Abigail. Miss Bennett, a word in private, if you please. Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of my customers, Sheriff, Abigail replied coolly. The sheriff's mouth tightened. Very well. I've come to officially inform you that the town council will be voting on the new ordinance this Thursday. Mayor Davis asked me to remind you of the options available to you. How kind of him, Abigail said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. Please inform the mayor that I'll be attending the council meeting myself. Sheriff Miller looked surprised. Women don't typically attend council meetings, Miss Bennett. Perhaps more of them should, Abigail countered. Isaac stepped forward. Sheriff, I understand Canon City has concerns about firearms being discharged within town limits. As a new property owner and taxpayer, I fully support safety measures. That's why I've offered Miss Bennett the use of my ranch for her classes. Sheriff Miller's eyes narrowed. Have you now? You might want to consider the company you're keeping, Mr. Newcomb. Some reputations in this town could affect your own standing. I appreciate your concern for my reputation, Sheriff, Isaac replied, his voice hardening slightly. But I make my own judgments about a person's character. The tension in the store was palpable. Eliza had moved to stand beside her brother, her expression curious but unafraid. Finally, Sheriff Miller touched the brim of his hat. I've delivered my message. Good day to you all. He turned and left, the bell jangling in his wake. Well, Eliza said into the silence that followed, I see what you mean about the town's attitude. Abigail sighed. Sheriff Miller isn't a bad man, he's just traditional. Traditional often means comfortable with injustice as long as it's familiar, Isaac observed quietly. Abigail looked at him with new appreciation. That's precisely it, Mr. Newcomb. Isaac, please, he corrected. If we're going to be partners in crime, according to the sheriff, we should at least be on a first-name basis. Partners in crime, Abigail repeated with a small laugh. I suppose that's one way to look at it. I prefer to think of it as partners in progress, Isaac said, his blue eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. Abigail felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. Partners in progress, she agreed softly. I like that. The following Tuesday dawned clear and mild, a perfect day for the first lesson at the Newcomb Ranch. True to his word, Isaac arrived in town with his wagon to transport those women without their own means of travel. Abigail had been surprised and gratified when nearly all of her students agreed to continue the lessons despite the change in location. She closed the mercantile early, leaving a sign on the door explaining her absence, and rode out to the ranch on her own horse, a sturdy bay mare named Penny. The ride gave her time to appreciate the beauty of the Colorado landscape, rolling hills covered in prairie grasses, with the distant mountains providing a majestic backdrop. The Newcomb Ranch came into view as she crested a small rise. The main house sat on a gentle slope, backed by a stand of cottonwood trees. A creek ran through the property, and green pastures stretched out on either side. The house itself was substantial but showed signs of neglect: peeling paint, a sagging porch, shutters hanging askew. Abigail could see Isaac's wagon already parked near the barn, and a group of women gathering in the open area beside it. As she approached, she noticed the improvements already underway: new fence posts, lumber stacked near the house, a vegetable garden freshly tilled. She dismounted near the barn, where Isaac was helping Mrs. Peterson down from the wagon. "Abigail," he greeted, his face lighting up in a way that sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. "Welcome to Newcomb Ranch. It's lovely," she said honestly. "You've already made progress, I see." "Eliza is a taskmaster," he replied with a grin. "She has me working from dawn till dusk." "Someone has to," Eliza said, approaching from the house with a tray of lemonade glasses. "Otherwise, we'd still be sleeping with the roof leaking on our heads." The women gathered eagerly around the refreshments, their initial nervousness giving way to excitement as they explored this new freedom away from town's watchful eyes. "I thought we could use that area there," Isaac suggested to Abigail, pointing to a flat stretch of ground with a hillside behind it. "Natural backstop for shooting practice and plenty of space for other activities." "It's perfect," Abigail agreed. "Thank you again for this." "No need for thanks," he said simply. "I believe in what you're doing." As Abigail gathered the women to begin the lesson, she was aware of Isaac watching from the barn doorway, his arms crossed over his chest. Unlike the suspicious or disapproving gazes she was accustomed to in town, his presence felt supportive. "Ladies," she began, "today we're going to review proper shooting stance and then move on to something new: how to break free if someone grabs you from behind." The lesson progressed smoothly, with the women visibly more relaxed and enthusiastic than they had been in town. Even Mrs. Peterson, usually the most hesitant, managed to hit the target 3 times in a row, earning applause from the others. When they moved to the self-defense portion, Abigail demonstrated the techniques on Eliza, who had volunteered as her partner. "If someone grabs you like this," Abigail explained, with Eliza holding her from behind, "your instinct may be to pull away. But instead, you want to drop your weight and step hard on their instep like so." She demonstrated in slow motion. "What if they're stronger than you?" asked Sarah Miller, the blacksmith's daughter. "That's when you use leverage, not strength," Abigail explained. "May I demonstrate on someone larger?" Before anyone could respond, Isaac stepped forward. "I volunteer." Abigail blinked in surprise. "Are you sure, Mr. Isaac?" "Absolutely," he replied with an easy smile. I'd like to see if these techniques really work on someone my size." The women tittered nervously as Isaac took his place behind Abigail. She was acutely aware of his height and the solid wall of his chest at her back. "Go ahead," she instructed. "Grab me as if you mean to restrain me." Isaac hesitated. "I don't want to hurt you." "You won't," Abigail assured him. "I know what I'm doing." With obvious reluctance, Isaac wrapped his arms around her, pinning her own arms to her sides. The contact sent a jolt of awareness through Abigail, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the demonstration. "Now, ladies, watch carefully," she said, her voice remarkably steady despite her racing heart. "First, I drop my weight, making it harder for him to lift me." She did so, feeling Isaac adjust his grip. "Then, I use my heel on his instep, which I won't actually do to Isaac, while simultaneously throwing my head back." She moved through the motions in slow motion, turning her head to the side so as not to actually strike him with the back of her head. The impact would stun him momentarily, giving me enough time to do this. She twisted sharply in his loosened grip, bringing her knee up to where it would connect with his groin if she completed the motion. Again, she stopped short of actual contact. Isaac released her immediately, stepping back with a new respect in his eyes. "Effective," he said, his voice slightly hoarse. "Very effective," Abigail agreed, suddenly aware of the 15 pairs of eyes watching them with intense interest. "Now pair up and practice slowly and carefully." No actual strikes, just learn the movements. As the women paired off, Isaac stayed close to Abigail. "Where did you learn all this?" he asked quietly. "Books, mostly," she admitted. "After my father died, I ordered every text I could find on self-defense and fighting techniques. Some from as far away as England and China. I practiced on my own until I felt confident enough to teach others." "That's remarkable," Isaac said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Most people would have accepted things as they were." "I'm not most people," Abigail replied, echoing his words from their earlier conversation. "No," he agreed, his eyes warm. "You most certainly are not." The lesson continued for another hour, with Isaac occasionally offering suggestions based on his own experiences. His input was practical and respectful, never undermining Abigail's authority with the group. As the women prepared to return to town, Mrs. Peterson approached Abigail, her usually timid demeanor replaced by quiet determination. "Miss Bennett," she said, keeping her voice low, "I wanted to thank you. Last night Mr. Peterson came home in one of his moods. For the first time I didn't cower. I stood my ground and told him I wouldn't tolerate his behavior." Her eyes shone with unshed tears. "He was so surprised he actually listened. We really talked for the first time in years." Abigail squeezed the older woman's hand. "I'm so glad, Mrs. Peterson. That's exactly why we're doing this, not to fight, but to be strong enough that fighting becomes unnecessary." After the last of the women had departed in Isaac's wagon, with Isaac himself driving them back to town, Abigail helped Eliza clean up the refreshment glasses. "You're very good at teaching," Eliza remarked. "The women respect you." "It's taken time to earn that respect," Abigail replied. Many of them were skeptical at first. I can imagine. The women in Virginia would faint at the very idea of such classes. Eliza's expression grew serious. "May I ask you something personal?" Abigail nodded, curious. "Why do you do this? Isaac mentioned something about your mother, but—" Abigail was silent for a moment, considering how much to share. Finally, she said, "My father was well respected in town, a successful merchant, a pillar of the community. But at home he was a different man. He drank, and when he drank, he became violent. My mother suffered for years in silence because she had nowhere to go, no means to support herself, and no way to fight back." "I'm so sorry," Eliza said softly. When I was 16, it was particularly bad. He broke her arm. I tried to intervene and he knocked me unconscious. Abigail's voice remained steady, though the memory still had the power to make her hands tremble. When I came to, I swore that I would never be that helpless again, and that I would do everything in my power to ensure other women had the same chance. Did your mother ever leave him? Abigail shook her head. She died 2 years later. Pneumonia, the doctor said, but I believe she simply lost the will to live. My father changed after that. The drinking got worse, but the violence turned inward. He died a year after she did. She met Eliza's gaze. I don't teach women to fight because I want them to become violent. I teach them because knowing you can defend yourself changes how you move through the world. It changes what you're willing to accept. Eliza reached out impulsively and squeezed Abigail's hand. I think you're the bravest person I've ever met. Abigail smiled, touched by the younger woman's warmth. Not brave, just stubborn, according to most of Canon City. Isaac admires you greatly, Eliza said, a hint of mischief entering her expression. He's talked of little else since he met you. Abigail felt her cheeks warm. Your brother is a good man. There aren't many who would open their property to a cause most of the town opposes. He's always been that way, standing up for what's right, even when it's unpopular. Eliza's expression softened. Our father was the same. He caused quite a scandal when he married our mother, but he never regretted it for a moment. Before Abigail could respond, the sound of hoofbeats announced Isaac's return. She found herself unexpectedly nervous as he dismounted and approached them. The ladies are safely returned to town, he reported. Though I must say the conversation on the ride back was enlightening. Mrs. Thornton is particularly enthusiastic about learning to throw a proper punch next time. Abigail laughed, her nervousness dissipating. Mrs. Thornton has hidden depths. I've always suspected she has a rather colorful past she doesn't discuss in polite company. Will you stay for supper, Abigail? Eliza asked. I've made a venison stew and there's plenty to share. Abigail hesitated. That's very kind, but I should get back to town before dark. I'd be happy to escort you afterward, Isaac offered. The trail can be tricky after sunset. Something in his expression, a mix of hope and sincerity, made it impossible for Abigail to refuse. In that case, I'd be delighted to stay. Dinner was served in the ranch house's kitchen, the only room that Isaac and Eliza had completely renovated so far. The large wooden table gleamed with fresh polish, and curtains made from fabric purchased at Abigail's store hung at the windows. Eliza's stew was delicious, and conversation flowed easily among the three of them. Isaac tells me you run the mercantile entirely on your own, Eliza remarked as she served apple pie for dessert. Yes, since my father passed, Abigail confirmed. It was challenging at first. Some suppliers didn't want to deal with a woman directly, and certain customers felt the same way. How did you handle that? Isaac asked, genuinely curious. Abigail smiled. For the suppliers, I simply made it clear that they could either do business with me or lose the account entirely. As for the customers, well, when someone needs flour or nails badly enough, they tend to overcome their prejudices. Isaac laughed. Practical as always. The mercantile has been in my family for 2 generations, Abigail explained. My grandfather built it, my father expanded it, and now it's mine. I don't intend to let outdated attitudes prevent me from preserving that legacy. What about the town council's threat? Eliza asked, concern evident in her voice. Isaac mentioned they might revoke your business license. Abigail's expression sobered. That's a real possibility. The meeting is on Thursday. I plan to attend and speak in my own defense, though I'm not sure it will make a difference. Mayor Davis has never approved of a woman running a business independently, and this gives him the perfect excuse to intervene. Is there anything we can do to help? Isaac asked, his blue eyes intent. You've already done more than enough, Abigail assured him. Moving the classes here removes their primary complaint about firearms in town. But the truth is, some of the council members don't object to what I'm doing so much as who I am, a woman who doesn't know her proper place. Then perhaps it's time Canon City reconsidered what a woman's proper place can be, Isaac said firmly. Eliza and I will attend the meeting as well. You don't have to, we want to, Eliza interrupted. Besides, Isaac is a property owner now. His voice should carry weight with the council. Abigail looked from brother to sister, touched by their support. Thank you, both of you. After dinner, Eliza insisted on cleaning up alone, practically shooing Abigail and Isaac out onto the porch. The sun was setting, painting the Colorado sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Your sister is quite determined when she wants to be, Abigail observed with a smile as they settled into the porch chairs Isaac had recently repaired. Always has been, Isaac agreed. When she sets her mind to something, there's no changing it. A family trait, it seems, Abigail said, glancing at him. Isaac smiled, the fading sunlight catching the angles of his face. Perhaps. Our mother used to say we both inherited the Newcomb stubbornness and the Cherokee resolve, a dangerous combination. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the sunset. Finally, Isaac spoke again, his voice quieter. Eliza told me a bit about your parents. I'm sorry for what you and your mother endured. Abigail tensed, then deliberately relaxed. Thank you. It was a long time ago. Some wounds don't heal with time alone, Isaac observed. They need purpose to truly mend. Abigail looked at him in surprise. Yes, exactly, teaching these women. It helps me feel that what happened wasn't entirely in vain, that something good can come from it. It already has, Isaac said. I saw the change in those women today. The confidence in their movements, the way they held themselves by the end of the lesson. You're making a difference, Abigail. His use of her first name, spoken with such warmth, sent a pleasant shiver through her. I hope so. I truly do. I know so, Isaac replied. He hesitated, then added, I admire what you're doing, more than I can properly express. Abigail felt a blush rise to her cheeks and was grateful for the dimming light. Most men find it threatening. Most men are fools, Isaac said simply. The directness of his statement made Abigail laugh. You certainly don't mince words, do you? Not when something matters, he replied, his gaze holding hers. The intensity in his blue eyes made Abigail's heart beat faster. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her hand, but instead he stood up. We should head back to town before it gets too dark, he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. The ride back to Canon City was peaceful, with a rising moon illuminating their path. Isaac rode beside Abigail, occasionally pointing out landmarks on his property or asking questions about the town's history. Their conversation was easy, punctuated by comfortable silences that felt natural rather than awkward. As they approached the town limits, Abigail found herself wishing the ride was longer. There was something freeing about being away from Canon City's judgmental eyes, something exhilarating about Isaac's company. Thank you for escorting me, she said as they reached the back of her mercantile, where a small stable housed Penny. And for everything else, the use of your ranch, your support with the council. You don't need to thank me, Isaac replied, dismounting to help her down from her horse. His hands at her waist were strong and sure, lingering for just a moment longer than necessary. I believe in you, Abigail, in what you stand for. Their faces were close in the moonlight, and Abigail found herself studying the contours of his features, the strong line of his jaw, the slight crinkles at the corners of his eyes, the fullness of his lips. "I should go in," she said softly, reluctantly stepping back. "It's late." Isaac nodded, releasing her. "Of course. Will we see you at the ranch on Thursday for the next lesson before the council meeting?" "Yes," Abigail confirmed, "though I may need to leave early to prepare." "I understand." He hesitated, then reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather light. "Good night, Abigail." "Good night, Isaac," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. As she watched him ride away, Abigail pressed her fingers to her cheek where his hand had been, a small smile playing at her lips. For the first time in a very long time, she felt something beyond the determination that had driven her for years, a flicker of something warm and hopeful, something that felt remarkably like happiness. Thursday's lesson at the ranch proceeded with even greater enthusiasm than Tuesday's. Word had spread among the women of Canon City, and 3 new students joined the group, including the young widow Mrs. Harding and her 16-year-old daughter, Clara. "I've wanted to attend for months," Mrs. Harding confided to Abigail. "But my late husband's brother, who manages our affairs, disapproved. When I heard the classes had moved to the Newcomb Ranch, I decided it was time to assert myself." Abigail welcomed them warmly, and the existing students eagerly helped the newcomers catch up. Today's lesson focused on breaking holds and basic punching techniques, with Eliza once again serving as Abigail's demonstration partner. Isaac kept a respectful distance, working on repairs to the barn, but remaining within sight. Occasionally, Abigail would catch him watching her, a look of admiration clear on his face even from across the yard. As the lesson concluded, Abigail addressed the group. "Ladies, I want to thank you all for your dedication. Today, I'll be attending the town council meeting to defend our right to continue these classes. If any of you wish to join me, your support would be most welcome." To Abigail's surprise, every woman present agreed to attend, even Mrs. Peterson, who had the most to lose socially, nodded her head firmly. "My husband will be furious," she said with unexpected steel in her voice. "But it's time he understood that I have opinions of my own." As the women departed, Isaac approached Abigail. That was quite a response. "Do you think they'll all actually attend?" "I'm not sure," Abigail admitted. "It's one thing to agree here away from town and another to publicly defy convention." "Either way, you won't be alone," Isaac assured her. "Eliza and I will be there." Abigail smiled gratefully. "Thank you. I should head back now to change and prepare what I want to say." "We'll see you at the meeting," Isaac promised. The town hall was unusually crowded when Abigail arrived that evening. She had taken special care with her appearance, wearing her best navy blue dress and pinning her hair in a simple but elegant style. She wanted to project respectability and confidence. Mayor Davis and the 4 other council members were seated at a long table at the front of the room. The mayor's eyes narrowed when he saw Abigail enter, but he made no comment. Sheriff Miller stood at the side of the room, his expression unreadable. Abigail was heartened to see Isaac and Eliza already present, seated near the front. As she moved toward them, the door opened again, and to her astonishment, Mrs. Peterson entered, followed by Mrs. Thornton and 3 other women from the class. They nodded to Abigail and took seats together. One by one, more women arrived, including Mrs. Harding and her daughter, and even Sarah Miller, whose father, the blacksmith, was on the council. By the time Mayor Davis called the meeting to order, nearly all of Abigail's students were present, along with their husbands, fathers, or brothers, some looking supportive, others decidedly uncomfortable. "First item on the agenda," Mayor Davis announced, is the proposed ordinance regarding firearms within town limits and unauthorized gatherings. He cleared his throat, glancing at the unexpected number of women present. The council will hear arguments before voting. He proceeded to outline the ordinance, emphasizing public safety concerns but making it clear that the real target was Abigail's classes. "Does anyone wish to speak on this matter?" he asked when he had finished. Abigail stood immediately. "I would, Mayor Davis." The mayor's mouth tightened. "Very well, Miss Bennett. Please be brief." Abigail moved to the front of the room, facing the council with her head held high. "Gentlemen of the council, I understand your concerns about firearms within town limits. That's why I've already moved my self-defense classes to the Newcomb Ranch outside town. This should address your safety concerns completely. The ordinance also addresses unauthorized gatherings of women," Councilman Miller, the blacksmith, pointed out, "which your classes clearly are." "With respect, Mr. Miller," Abigail replied, "there is no law in Canon City or the Colorado Territory that prevents women from gathering for educational purposes. My classes teach essential skills for survival in a frontier environment no different than teaching someone to cook, sew, or administer basic medical care." "Self-defense is hardly a womanly skill," Mayor Davis interjected. "On the contrary," Abigail countered. "In a territory where men frequently travel for work, leaving women alone to manage households and businesses, the ability to protect oneself is absolutely essential." "That's what the sheriff's office is for," Councilman Edwards added. Sheriff Miller shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. "The sheriff cannot be everywhere at once," Abigail pointed out, "and sometimes the danger comes from within a home, not outside it." A murmur ran through the crowd at this statement. Abigail continued, her voice steady. "Gentlemen, I'm not teaching women to be violent or to disrespect authority. I'm teaching them to be confident, capable, and safe. These are virtues that benefit our entire community." Mayor Davis leaned forward. "Miss Bennett, this council has received numerous complaints about your activities. They are disruptive to the natural order of our town." "If I may, Mayor Davis," a new voice spoke up. Isaac Newcomb stood, commanding attention with his height and presence. "As a new property owner and taxpayer in Canon City, I'd like to address the council." The mayor hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Very well, Mr. Newcomb. Though I fail to see how this concerns you." "It concerns me greatly," Isaac replied, moving to stand beside Abigail. "First, as the owner of the property where Miss Bennett now conducts her classes, I can assure the council that all safety measures are in place. The lessons occur in a controlled environment, away from town, with proper backstops for target practice." He paused, looking around the room. "Second, as the brother of a young woman new to the West, I consider these skills invaluable. The natural order the mayor refers to may work well in eastern cities with established police forces and social structures, but out here, self-reliance is not just admirable, it's necessary for survival." Abigail glanced at Isaac gratefully, before addressing the council again. "Gentlemen, look around this room. Every woman here has attended my classes voluntarily because they recognize the value of what they're learning. They are your wives, daughters, and sisters. They aren't asking for your permission to feel safe, they're simply informing you of their decision to take responsibility for their own safety." Mrs. Peterson suddenly rose to her feet, her voice quavering but determined. "If I may speak, Mayor Davis." The council members exchanged surprised glances. Margaret Peterson was known for her propriety and deference to male authority. "This is highly irregular," the mayor protested. "Nevertheless, I wish to speak," Mrs. Peterson insisted with unexpected firmness. Mayor Davis sighed. Briefly then, Mrs. Peterson. The banker's wife stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly before her. I have lived in Canon City for 23 years. I have always been a dutiful wife and respected the town's traditions. But I must tell you that Miss Bennett's classes have changed my life for the better. She took a deep breath before continuing. My husband and I have had difficulties in our marriage. Learning to defend myself has not made me violent. It has given me the confidence to stand up for myself, to speak my mind. As a result, our relationship has actually improved. Mr. Peterson, seated at the back, looked uncomfortable but nodded slightly when eyes turned to him. I am a better wife, a stronger person because of these classes, Mrs. Peterson concluded. And I implore this council not to take them away from the women of Canon City. As she returned to her seat, other women stood to share similar stories. Mrs. Thornton, whose home had been broken into last winter while her husband was away. Sarah Miller, who spoke of wanting to be able to help in her father's blacksmith shop without fear of unwanted attention from certain customers. Mrs. Harding, whose brother-in-law's control over her affairs had become increasingly oppressive since her husband's death. One by one, they testified to the positive impact of Abigail's teaching, not just in terms of physical skills but in their overall confidence and well-being. Throughout these testimonials, Abigail stood tall, emotion threatening to overwhelm her but pride keeping her composed. Beside her, Isaac remained a steady, supportive presence. When the last woman had spoken, Mayor Davis cleared his throat. While these personal accounts are touching, the council must consider the broader implications for public order and propriety. If I may make a suggestion, Sheriff Miller unexpectedly spoke up from his position at the side of the room. All eyes turned to him in surprise. Sheriff, the mayor acknowledged. As the person responsible for maintaining law and order in Canon City, I initially shared the council's concerns about Miss Bennett's activities, Sheriff Miller began. However, I have observed no increase in disorderly conduct among the women who attend her classes. In fact, I've noted fewer domestic disturbances requiring my intervention in recent months. He straightened his shoulders. Furthermore, with the classes now being conducted outside town limits on private property, I see no legal basis for the council to intervene. As long as Mr. Newcomb consents to the use of his land and proper safety measures are in place, this falls outside our jurisdiction. Mayor Davis's face reddened. Sheriff Miller, this ordinance was partially drafted at your suggestion, and I was wrong, Sheriff Miller replied simply. As an officer of the law, I must uphold rights, not just tradition. These women have the right to learn to protect themselves, just as any man does. A murmur of approval ran through the crowd. Abigail caught the sheriff's eye and nodded her thanks. He returned the nod, a hint of respect in his gaze that hadn't been there before. Mayor Davis conferred briefly with the other council members before addressing the room again. In light of recent developments and the relocation of activities outside town limits, the council will table the proposed ordinance pending further review. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was enough for now. Abigail felt a wave of relief wash over her. Meeting adjourned, Mayor Davis announced, clearly displeased with the outcome. As people began to disperse, Isaac turned to Abigail. "Congratulations," he said warmly. "You stood your ground beautifully." "We all did," Abigail replied, her eyes shining as she looked around at the women gathering to congratulate each other. "I couldn't have done this alone." "Miss Bennett," Sheriff Miller approached, his hat in his hands. "I owe you an apology. I let my own prejudices cloud my judgment." "Thank you, Sheriff," Abigail said, genuinely touched by his admission. "That can't have been easy to say." Easier than continuing to be wrong, he replied with a slight smile. My wife has asked if she might join your next class, by the way. Seems she's been interested for some time but didn't want to put me in an awkward position. Abigail laughed. She's more than welcome. Tuesday at 2 o'clock. As the sheriff moved away, Eliza joined them, her eyes bright with excitement. That was magnificent. The look on Mayor Davis's face when all those women stood up to speak, I'll treasure it forever. It's not over, Abigail cautioned. The mayor won't give up so easily. Maybe not, Isaac agreed, but he'll think twice before underestimating you or any woman in Canon City again. The following weeks brought a new rhythm to Abigail's life. The self-defense classes at the Newcomb Ranch expanded to 3 days a week to accommodate growing demand. Even women from neighboring communities began to attend, having heard about the unusual opportunity through friends and relatives. Mayor Davis and his allies on the council maintained their disapproval, but seemed to recognize that public opinion had shifted. They made no further attempts to interfere with the classes, though Abigail occasionally caught hostile glances when she encountered them in town. More significant to Abigail than this professional victory was her deepening relationship with Isaac Newcomb. What had begun as a practical arrangement had evolved into something much more personal. Isaac made a point of visiting the mercantile several times a week, ostensibly for supplies but lingering to talk. On Sundays, he and Eliza invited Abigail to join them for dinner after church, and these meals became the highlight of her week. As spring gave way to summer, the Newcomb Ranch transformed under Isaac and Eliza's care. The house had been completely renovated with fresh paint, new windows, and a sturdy roof. The garden flourished, providing abundant vegetables, and Isaac's small herd of cattle grew as he purchased neighboring land. One warm July evening, after a particularly successful class where every woman had mastered the techniques Abigail was teaching, Isaac asked if she would join him for a ride before returning to town. There's something I'd like to show you, he explained, a hint of nervous excitement in his voice. Curious, Abigail agreed. Isaac led her away from the ranch house, following the creek that ran through his property. They rode in companionable silence for about 20 minutes until they reached a small meadow nestled among cottonwood trees. In the center of the meadow stood a half-built structure. "What's this?" Abigail asked as they dismounted. Isaac looked almost shy as he gestured toward the foundation and framed walls. "It's going to be a proper training facility. With the number of women attending your classes now, I thought you could use a dedicated space somewhere to practice when the weather's bad, with storage for equipment and room for everyone to move comfortably." Abigail stared at the structure, then at Isaac, deeply touched by his thoughtfulness. "You're building this. For me, for the classes, for all of you," Isaac corrected gently. "You've created something important here, Abigail, something that should have a permanent home." Abigail walked slowly around the foundation, noting the careful craftsmanship and attention to detail. "It's wonderful, Isaac. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help me finish it," he suggested, following her. "I've got the basic structure planned, but I'd like your input on the interior layout, what features would be most useful for your teaching." "Of course I will," Abigail agreed, her smile radiant. This is incredibly generous." Isaac stepped closer, his expression serious. "There's something else I'd like to discuss with you, Abigail." The tone of his voice made her heart beat faster. "Yes. These past months, getting to know you, working beside you." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "You've changed how I see the world, how I think about things I once took for granted. Your courage, your conviction, they're remarkable." Abigail felt warmth spreading through her chest at his words. "You've changed me too, Isaac. You showed me that there are good men in this world, men who respect women as equals, who support them instead of trying to control them. Isaac took her hands in his touch gentle but sure. I've come to care for you deeply, Abigail, more than I thought possible. I know it hasn't been very long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Abigail's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the earnest intent in his blue eyes. Isaac. I'm not asking for an answer today, he said quickly. I know you value your independence, your business. I would never ask you to give those up. But I want you to know that my feelings for you are serious, and if you're ready to consider a future together, I'll be here. Emotion welled up in Abigail's chest, happiness mingled with a fear she hadn't expected. Her life had been so carefully constructed around her autonomy, her mission. The thought of allowing someone else in, of risking her heart, was terrifying. Yet as she looked at Isaac, this man who had supported her, unconditionally, who saw her strength as an asset rather than a threat, who built a training facility for her cause without being asked, she realized that loving him wouldn't mean losing herself. It would mean gaining a partner in every sense of the word. I care for you too, Isaac, she admitted softly, very much, but I need some time. This is new territory for me. Relief washed over his face, followed by a smile that reached his eyes. Take all the time you need, Abigail. I'm not going anywhere. They stood together in the golden light of the setting sun, hands still joined, the half-built structure a promise of things to come. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, but comfortably so, each lost in their own thoughts but acutely aware of the other's presence. When they reached the barn, Isaac helped Abigail dismount, his hands lingering at her waist for a moment. I'll see you on Sunday for dinner, he asked, his voice hopeful. Yes, Abigail confirmed with a smile. I'll bring apple pie. As she rode back to town that evening, Abigail felt a lightness in her heart that had been absent for most of her life. The pain of her past would always be part of her, but it no longer defined her future. The following weeks were filled with activity. The training facility at the Newcomb Ranch progressed rapidly, with Isaac working long hours to complete it before the fall weather arrived. Abigail visited frequently to offer suggestions and sometimes to work alongside him, discovering an unexpected pleasure in physical labor and creation. In town, attitudes were slowly shifting. While some still disapproved of Abigail's classes, many had come to respect her dedication and the positive changes they witnessed in the women who attended. Business at the Mercantile actually improved, with new customers coming from neighboring communities who had heard about the woman shopkeeper of Canon City. One Tuesday afternoon in late August, as Abigail was demonstrating a particularly effective blocking technique to her now considerable class, she noticed a familiar figure watching from the edge of the group. Sheriff Miller, she acknowledged, pausing in her demonstration. Have you come to observe, or would you like to join us? The sheriff smiled, something that had become more common in recent months. Neither, actually. I've come with news I thought you'd want to hear immediately. Abigail's brow furrowed with concern. Is something wrong? Not at all, Sheriff Miller assured her. Quite the opposite. The town council just concluded an emergency meeting. Mayor Davis has resigned due to health concerns, and the council has appointed Richard Peterson as interim mayor until the election next spring. A murmur of excitement ran through the class, particularly from Mrs. Peterson, whose husband had become an unexpected ally in recent months. Furthermore, Sheriff Miller continued, Mr. Peterson's first official act was to formally withdraw the proposed ordinance regarding women's gatherings and self-defense classes. The council voted unanimously in support. Abigail felt a rush of emotion, vindication, relief, and pure joy. That's wonderful news, Sheriff. Thank you for bringing it personally. Sheriff Miller nodded. Credit where it's due, Miss Bennett. You've changed this town for the better, whether some folks want to admit it or not. He tipped his hat to the assembled women. Ladies, carry on. I look forward to seeing what you accomplish next. As he departed, the class erupted in cheers and congratulations. Abigail found herself embraced by one woman after another, their genuine happiness warming her heart. When the excitement subsided, she caught sight of Isaac standing near the newly completed training facility, watching with evident pride. Excusing herself from the group, she walked over to join him. "You heard?" she asked, her eyes shining. "I heard," Isaac confirmed, his smile matching hers. "Congratulations, Abigail, you did it." "We did it," she corrected, suddenly bold as she reached for his hand. "I couldn't have done this without you, Isaac. Your support, your belief in me, they made all the difference." His fingers interlaced with hers, strong and reassuring. "You would have found a way. That's who you are, unstoppable when you believe in something." Abigail looked up at him, at the man who had come to mean so much to her in such a relatively short time. In his eyes, she saw not just admiration but a deep, abiding love that took her breath away. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told him softly, "about a future together." Isaac's expression grew serious, hopeful, and I've realized something important," Abigail continued. "All these years, I've been fighting against injustice, against the memories of my father, against a world that wanted to keep women small and afraid. But with you, I've discovered what it means to fight for something instead, for happiness, for partnership, for love." Isaac's hand tightened around hers. "Abigail, I love you, Isaac Newcomb," she said simply, the words feeling natural and right, "and I'm ready, more than ready, to consider that future together." The joy that spread across his face was like the sun breaking through clouds. Without a word, he drew her into his arms, holding her close as if she were something infinitely precious. "I love you, Abigail Bennett," he whispered against her hair, "more than I have words to express." When he lowered his head to kiss her, Abigail met him halfway, her heart full to bursting with the promise of tomorrow. Their wedding took place on a crisp October day, with the aspen trees blazing gold against the mountains. It was held at the Newcomb Ranch, in the meadow where the training facility now stood complete. The entire town seemed to attend, supporters and former detractors alike, curious to witness the union of Canon City's most controversial woman and the cowboy who had championed her cause. Abigail wore a simple ivory dress, her auburn hair adorned with wildflowers Eliza had helped her gather that morning. As she walked toward Isaac, who waited beneath an arch of twisted branches and autumn blooms, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The vows they exchanged were traditional in form but deeply personal in content. They spoke of partnership, of respect, of walking side by side through whatever life might bring. When Isaac promised to support her work, for as long as there are women who need to learn their own strength, tears of joy spilled down Abigail's cheeks. The celebration afterward was unlike any Canon City had seen before. Tables laden with food lined the meadow. Music from fiddles and guitars filled the air, and women who had once been too timid to speak in public now danced freely alongside their husbands and fathers. Sheriff Miller offered a toast to the couple, his words capturing the sentiment of many. "To Isaac and Abigail Newcomb, who remind us that true strength lies not in control but in respect, not in tradition alone, but in the courage to forge new paths when the old ones no longer serve us well." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land that was now their shared home, Isaac drew Abigail away from the festivities for a moment of privacy. "Happy, Mrs. Newcomb?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Abigail replied, leaning into his embrace. "And you, complete," he said simply, pressing a kiss to her forehead. The transition to married life was surprisingly seamless. Abigail continued to run the mercantile in town, though now with part-time help from Eliza, who had discovered a talent for business. 3 days a week, she taught her classes at the ranch's training facility, which had been officially named Bennett's Academy in honor of her mother. Isaac's cattle operation thrived, and he expanded to include horse breeding as well. Together, they created a home that was both a refuge and a center of community life, where visitors were always welcome and ideas flowed freely. One evening the following spring, as they sat on the porch watching a thunderstorm roll across the distant plains, Abigail turned to her husband with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "Isaac, there's something I need to tell you." He looked at her curiously. "What is it, love?" Abigail took a deep breath. "I visited Dr. Mason yesterday. I've been feeling different lately." Understanding dawned in Isaac's eyes, followed by hopeful wonder. "Abigail, are you?" She nodded, a smile blooming on her face. "We're going to have a baby. In late October, the doctor thinks." Isaac was momentarily speechless, his eyes filling with tears of joy. Then he gathered her gently in his arms, his touch reverent. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." "I'm a bit scared," Abigail admitted. "I know how to teach women to defend themselves, how to run a business. But being a mother is uncharted territory." Isaac brushed a strand of hair from her face tenderly. "You'll be an extraordinary mother, Abigail. Our child will grow up knowing they're loved, respected, and valued, boy or girl." He placed a hand over her still flat stomach. "And they'll have the strongest, bravest, most compassionate mother in the Colorado Territory." Abigail covered his hand with her own. "And the most loving, supportive father." As the months passed, Abigail's pregnancy became a subject of much interest in Canon City. Some of the older women who had once disapproved of her unfeminine activities now offered advice and gifts for the baby, seemingly delighted to see her embracing motherhood. Abigail continued teaching her classes well into her 7th month, making adaptations as her body changed. Her students were protective and supportive, several of the more advanced women taking on assistant teaching roles to help demonstrate techniques Abigail could no longer perform comfortably. On a cold, clear morning in early November, after a labor that lasted through the night, Abigail gave birth to a healthy son. They named him Jonathan Thomas Newcomb Jonathan, for Abigail's father, a way of reclaiming what had once been painful and giving it new meaning, and Thomas for Sheriff Miller, who had become a true friend and ally. As Abigail held her son for the first time, with Isaac sitting beside them on the bed, she felt a sense of completion she had never known before. This was what she had been fighting for all along, not just the right to defend oneself, but the right to create a world where such defense might one day be unnecessary. "He has your eyes," Isaac observed, gently stroking their son's downy head. "And your chin," Abigail replied with a tired smile. "He's perfect." Isaac kissed her forehead. "You both are." In the years that followed, Bennett's Academy flourished, eventually expanding to include classes for children of both genders as well as women. Abigail wrote a manual on women's self-defense that was published in Denver and distributed throughout the Western Territories, bringing her methods to communities far beyond Canon City. Isaac's ranching operation became one of the most successful in the county, known for fair dealing and innovative practices. Together, they used their influence to advocate for women's rights and education, establishing a scholarship for girls who wished to pursue higher learning. Jonathan was joined by two sisters, Alina in 1885 and Maria in 1888. All three children grew up in an environment where strength and compassion were equally valued, where they learned both traditional skills and the importance of standing up for what was right. When the Colorado Territory achieved statehood and women's suffrage became a central issue, Abigail was at the forefront of the movement, organizing meetings at Bennett's Academy and speaking publicly about the importance of women's voices in governance. In 1893, when Colorado became one of the first states to grant women the right to vote, she and Isaac celebrated with tears of joy and a profound sense that the world was finally beginning to change in meaningful ways. On a warm summer evening in 1897, 15 years after Isaac had first walked into Bennett's mercantile, the Newcomb family gathered on the porch of their expanded ranch house. Jonathan, now 14 and tall like his father, was reading aloud from a newspaper account of women training as nurses for possible service in the brewing conflict with Spain. Eleanor, 12 and fiercely independent, was practicing knife throwing at a target Isaac had set up for her. 9-year-old Maria sat at Abigail's feet, working on a quilt square while listening to her brother read. Isaac settled beside Abigail on the porch swing, his arm around her shoulders. Though there was gray at his temples now and fine lines around his eyes, he was as handsome to her as the day they met. "Happy?" he asked, echoing the question he had first posed on their wedding day. Abigail looked at their children, then at the training facility visible in the distance where tomorrow she would teach yet another group of women to stand tall and unafraid. Finally, she looked at Isaac, her partner, her champion, her love. "Beyond anything I could have imagined," she replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And you?" Isaac's answer was the same as it had always been, simple and true, complete. As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of red and gold, Abigail reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a girl determined never to be helpless, to a woman labeled a troublemaker for teaching others the same, to a wife and mother who had helped change the very fabric of her community. It had been a path with many challenges, but not one she would trade for any other. The troublemaker had found her place after all, not by conforming to the world's expectations, but by having the courage to create something new, a life, a family, a legacy built on the belief that strength and love were not opposing forces but complementary ones, each made more powerful by the presence of the other. And in that knowledge, in the arms of the cowboy who had asked for lessons all those years ago, Abigail Bennett Newcomb found her truest peace.